Alrighty, so we're gonna actually do two reviews today. If you watched the MPA DS9, I reviewed it earlier. And now we're gonna take a pretty big departure from that. What we're looking at is a TAURUS TX22. I don't think there's really anyone out there that hears TAURUS and thinks, wow, what a beautiful, phenomenally built product. But this is the TX22 competition. And I have had a really good experience with it. If you're not wanting to spend a lot of money as far as an upfront investment, this is going to be quite cheap. But beyond that, it's going to be really cheap to run because it is, will eat just about any 22 LR ammo, and 22 is cheap as is. But the fact that you can feed it shitty bulk 22 ammo is going to make that experience not only cheap as far as the startup, but it's going to be cheap long term because it's just cheap to run, period. So what are the talking points of a TX22? So I will talk about what stands out to me as far as a shooter, and that might be totally different from what stands out to you or what you're looking for, but this is what I'm thinking of, and this is what impresses me. So the trigger pull itself and the gun is safe. You're probably not going, it's probably not going to focus, probably not going to show you what I'm talking about, but there is not a round in the chamber. There's not a round in the mag. We're totally safe. So that trigger pull is, this is a striker fired gun versus hammer fired. Traditionally, a striker fired gun is going to be considerably worse compared to just about any hammer fired gun on the market. This is a pretty clean take up. So this is actually a trigger shoe that goes over it. You're not touching the true trigger, but that's about where the breaking point is. It's not as distinct as something like an MPA DS9, but for something that runs you a hair over $400, pretty impressive, pretty distinct pull. Just a hair more take up, so I wasn't quite able to distinguish where that break was perfectly. And then there's going to be some pushback, and then you can feel an audible reset, and it's pretty distinct from the feel, but you get a little bit of a noise, and it's going to push you out to where it resets, and then you're back on it. So that reset, I hope that you can actually see that, because not only does it have a really distinct trigger for a striker fired firearm, but it's also got a pretty sweet short take up as far as, well, the take up itself is about medium. It's not really short or really long, but the reset is quite short, and it's a really easy one to read, that transition into that reset. So if you're trying to get the ultimate follow-up and you are only going out to that reset before you pull again, it's going to be a little bit easier to read that with this. This is just a cheap little Hollow Sun 3 MOA dot that I've got on here. It does have adjustable iron sights. The sights themselves are plastic, and they are nothing to write home. They work perfectly fine, but they are... These sights reflect the price, let's put it like that. Whereas a lot of things about this gun, to me, is hitting way above, I mean way above $400. So the trigger itself is, a pretty distinct wall with just a little bit, just a hair of grit in it before you actually meet the wall. And the reset's phenomenal. But the other points, so they've lightened the slide with this design. As you can see here, they cut a ton of it out, so you're going to have less reciprocating mass, if I can speak today. And that's going to reduce your dive and your recoil, and I know it is a 22, And when you're shooting a 22, you're not feeling recoil from the round itself. 22 is just not powerful enough to, if it's in like a revolver, you're not going to have any real recoil or muzzle rise or muzzle flip, whatever you'd like to call it. But in something that's semi-automatic that has reciprocating mass, you are going to get a little bit more compared to a revolver. And so it's nice that they reduced the weight, because the biggest factor in this gun, as far as having any kind of recoil, of course it doesn't have much, and your follow-up time is going to be a lot quicker with any 22 period. But the fact that they've taken time to reduce that is nice, and it probably does help to some extent. And they actually have this in kind of a concealed carry setup, which I think is really cool, because this has been a phenomenally likes all the ammo you give it, which is nice. And yeah, I just think it's cool that they made a concealed carry. I don't know if 22 is necessarily the best thing to carry, but I don't know. Still think it's cool. And it is optic ready. It does come with this plate, which has a few different compatible, it's got multiple setups on here. So you can run a lot of different optics on top of this. You don't have to go out and purchase anything extra. And so the barrel lockup is actually pretty good. So it is a fixed barrel. It is a fixed barrel. And there's not a ton of, there's just a little bit of play. And so you have an advantage of, you can see the optic is actually mounted straight to the top of the barrel. So the optic plate mounts to the barrel, and then that just mounts right on top of the barrel. The advantage is that you have less reciprocating mass there. And then also, because something like a TAURUS TX22, to reduce cost and make sure that they're still running a profitable business strategy that actually functions and is worth having, is that these parts are much looser fitting compared to something like a hand-fitted MPA DS9. I know it's a weird thing to compare it to, but I handled one earlier today, and it's what's present in my mind. But you're going to have a little bit more play. That barrel, even though it's a fixed barrel, there's still a little bit of play in that. And if you were just using the iron sights that come with the gun, I do think you're going to be shooting at a disadvantage versus mounting. I mean, obviously iron sights are a disadvantage in the shooting world, period. Just because running a red dot is going to be a big advantage, basically. So the fact that you can mount that there is going to mean that there's less. So with a 22, the problems you're going to have when you mount this to the slide is it's going to make it, one, less reliable. Accuracy is going to be less, because there is going to be some barrel play. So the fact that it's mounted right to that barrel, when that barrel doesn't sit in the same exact place every single time, that doesn't matter, because then this will also adjust to the way that it's seated that particular time. So I think that's a huge advantage. And then also you're going to get less recoil because there is less reciprocating mass, whereas this is fixed in one place. So that follow-up shots are going to be a lot easier. And on top of it, it's 22. So there's not a ton of recoil anyway. But what you end up with is that I can do, and again, I'm not some competition shooter, I can do all 16 shots in 4 seconds flat, maybe a hair under 4 seconds. And I can keep them in a grouping that is probably a little bit larger than this Wheeler Engineering trigger gauge. And I would say that the trigger pull on this is around 4.5 pounds, somewhere in that mark. Might be 5 pounds, might be 4 pounds. But I would say on average, you're looking at about 4.5 pounds. I haven't actually measured it yet. That's just what I'm getting through my finger. But we will go ahead and see what TAURUS gives you as far as triggers are concerned, what they can give you when it comes to a gun that you can go out and pick up for about $450, and then you can shoot it for real cheap. All right, so we will go ahead and get some readings here. This is going to be more difficult because the way that this trigger sits. Okay, so I actually got a trigger break there of 3 pounds, 14.1 ounce. So yeah, under 4 pounds. And again, this is a $400, mid $400 22. So we are going to do an average of 5, which is what we did. If you feel free to go and check out if you're looking at something like a double stack 1911 or 2011, whatever you want to call it. I did a review on an MPA DS9, and I am very impressed with that firearm. So that was 3 pounds, 11 ounces. Gotta say, very impressed. And that was 4 pounds, 1.5 ounce. And that was 3 pounds, 14.2 ounces. And this is going to be our 5th pull, so this will give us our average. And that was 3 pounds, 11.2 ounces, which makes for an average, that's five trigger breaks there, of 3 pounds, 13.6 ounces. I hope you can make that out, because I think that is kind of crazy, you know, from a gun that you can not only run incredibly cheap, but you can pick up for really cheap. And the fact that you can get something that is built quite well and has some really desirable traits is phenomenal. 3 pounds, 13.6 ounces is crazy good. And weight is not everything in the world of triggers. Obviously, it's going to be easier to shoot something if you can find that wall a lot quicker. And it is a pretty distinct wall. You go there, and then you're basically on the wall. You got just a little bit more movement, and then you got a trigger break, and your reset again is right there. And I actually went a little bit past the reset. So very quick reset with a medium pull length as far as to get to that breaking point. An absolutely phenomenal trigger. I really cannot praise the TAURUS TX22 enough for the trigger. And I think it was incredibly smart with the way they did where you set the optic up, because that way they don't have to have perfectly hand-fitted parts. There can be that play. I know you're not going to see that, but I do feel a bit of play left to right and up and down as far as the barrel is concerned when it's in lockup. And it is a fixed barrel, but there is still play. So I think the way they set that up is just incredibly smart. I think ergonomically, this gun, I wear a large glove, and this gun just does it really, really well. You've got nice undercut here. You've got pretty deep set here, and you've also got pretty good texture. I would say the texture is about a medium as far as my review. You don't need anything super grippy on a 22, but it's always nice to have a nice grippy, you know, a nice grippy setup, but ergonomically, this fits in your hands really, really well. And then between just the way that it fits in your hands and a really good out-of-the-box trigger, I haven't modified this in any kind of way. This is straight out of the box. It is well into its break-in. I don't think your trigger is going to come out at sub 4 pounds. I've put about 5,000 rounds in this. The only thing that I've noticed that's getting annoying in that 5,000 rounds is that this has become incredibly loose. And when you're really bearing down on that gun and you're going to try and get the most aggressive as far as follow-up shots and being really, really quick, you're going to grip it so hard. And with my larger hands, I end up flipping this to the on position. I end up flipping it on, and then all of a sudden I go from having an amazing trigger to pulling to about 8 pounds and realizing that I flipped the safety on this particular piece. And I have owned the TX22 that wasn't the competition version, and I was experiencing that same exact issue. And that also that started to occur around 8,000 rounds, whereas in this one I got about 5,000 rounds through it. So it did happen a little bit earlier in this. And that's really the only thing that's ever bugged me about this. It also comes with a hard case. Gun comes in a hard case, easy to carry. Has the cutouts for 2 spare magazines and the pistol, and then it also has a cutout for where your red dot is going to sit if you run it that way. And it does come with 2 magazines, and these are actually 30 grain, very high velocity, about I want to say 16 feet per second out of like a 16-inch barrel. So obviously they're probably around 1,100 feet per second out of here, and that cycles perfectly fine. I've even run CCI that is a 1070 FPS, 40 grain, and it's run perfectly fine as well. So I really like that this is a 22 that's going to run, even as a semi-automatic. A lot of the semi-automatic 22s are going to be very finicky and picky with what you can feed them. Which is going to increase your running cost. And then also if you go to your favorite gun store and they're out of that ammo, well, it kind of ruined your day. So the fact that it will eat just about any 22 is really nice. And it does come with 3 magazines. The magazines hold, I believe it's 16 rounds each, and then you can hold 1 in the chamber, obviously. It is a double stack design because 16, you are seeing a lot more of them now. A lot more of the 22s. The TX22 has kind of paved a path to where the market, other companies realizing that the high capacity 22s are selling well. So I think SIG has come out with something. I think HK has come out with something. Also very high capacity, and I believe, what is the ugly handgun that everyone seems to love? I think Glock has also come out with a high capacity 22. It, from what I've heard, does not run reliably and is very picky with ammo. But if you want something that matches, if you carry a Glock or something like that, and you want something that matches, I don't really think that's the best. It's not a technique that I would suggest, shooting a 22 and shooting something like a 9mm or a 40 or a 10mm. There's a lot of stuff that Glock has as far as chambered different setups you can run. I get, it's like, cheap way to practice, but the way you shoot that 9mm versus the way you shoot a 22 is going to be very differently. Even if they feel the same in the hand, the shooting experience is going to be very different. So it is personally not what I would suggest, but I do hear a lot of people want the Glock variant, for that reasoning. So yeah, I would highly suggest a TAURUS TX22 if you want to do some cheap shooting at the range. And I have even shot this at 100 yards and been able to get pretty successful hits on a 5-pound extinguisher. So that was with the red dot on there, and I was shooting from a bag. I'm not the type of guy who can shoot 100 yards with a pistol, standing or unsupported. I would love to get there. I'm just not there yet. But all right, I appreciate you taking the time to look at this review, and hopefully you pick one of these up and end up having a really enjoyable range toy.